All right, welcome everybody. Anyone recognize the background, by the way? So today we are going to be talking about. It is from Kimi no Wa. It is a great anime. So today we're going to be talking about corporate censorship, and this was not actually what I was intending to talk about today. I was going to talk about fallacies, but with all this stuff coming out about the lab leak theory and like Facebook censorship and the Twitter files, this class does change based on current events, and so this is hot in the news right now. So this is what we're going to do our next discussion forum on: corporate censorship. So censorship, technically speaking, is when the government suppresses speech. Okay. Um, in America, censorship is illegal. There's limited circumstances, like when you have military secrets and things like that. But in general, the government is not allowed to say, you can say this, you can't say that. It's not true in all countries. Like in Thailand, they have a lèse majesty law, which forbids you from saying anything bad about the king. And if you go back in time, there's a lot of not free speech countries out there in the country, right? In the world. Nowadays, though, most modern democracies have some form of freedom of speech, although it varies quite substantially from country to country. Like France doesn't have the same protections that we have in America, for example, or Canada, for that matter. Okay, but here's the thing: like when a company deletes words, it's not censorship technically, because the government's not doing it. And so a lot of people, like in the cancel culture thing, said, well, people have First Amendment rights, and we do, but not on Facebook. Right? Like there's actually no guarantee of freedom of speech on Reddit or on Twitter or on Facebook. There's not. They're a company, it's their own servers, they can delete anything they want on it, and Section 230 prohibits them basically from being sued for almost anything related to that on their platforms. That's currently going under judicial review right now by the Supreme Court. And if they strike down Section 230, then who knows? Like it might just kill social media. And we could probably have a debate on whether or not that would be good for our society, right? Is social media, like if we just killed all social media, like what would happen? I don't even know, right? So, yeah, in Germany doesn't have free speech protections in the same way we do. Like some guy taught his dog to do like the Hitler salute, and he got arrested for it or something. I don't know. Maybe it was in England. Yeah. So corporate censorship, though, is really our topic. And corporate censorship is when Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, Google, whatever, deletes things that people say. And it's technically legal, but people still have, it's yeah, they're free to delete it, but we as free citizens are free to complain about it, right? Like, they can't tell us we can't complain about it, right? Being able to whine is an American right. That's what our country was founded on, right? Being able to protest. So the thing is like a lot of people are happy when like big tech deletes posts by people of the other political alignment. So you have to, like, whenever you talk about this topic, you should probably think about it like, what if they were deleting your viewpoint, right? What if you're a member of a group? Let's make it non-political. Let's say you're part of a soccer club or something, and Google deleted any positive mention of your soccer club. Like every time somebody Googled your soccer club, like only the wildest, most negative things about it, maybe complete lies. Like, your soccer team is full of MS-13 gang members, and everybody on that soccer team is addicted to heroin, and everybody on that soccer team are horrible neo-Nazis, and and every time somebody looked up like your soccer team and they're like, oh, I want to join your soccer team, they're like, oh damn dude, look at that. And like I think we can all agree that this would have a negative impact on your group, right? Like people would just like be like, oh, I don't think I want to join that group anymore, and public perception of your group would tank, because every time somebody Googled something, Like they'd be like, oh, geez, that doesn't look good, you know? And so these companies really do have the ability to shape public perception and influence on things. And the trouble is like, that's a lot of power. And currently there's not really any rules for like their use of that power. And maybe there shouldn't be any rules. Like that's what Google would say. Like we're a company. We're free to set rules however we want. But at the same time, Congress is free to call the head of Google and the head of Twitter to the floor, essentially. And it's this wild, if you tried describing this to people in the 1950s, like, okay, there's a newspaper and the newspaper would publish letters to the editor by everybody, but like they won't allow certain people to publish letters to the editor. And so Congress is asking them why they won't publish letters to the editor. And you're like, what is happening? Like, what, how is that the world that we're in, And yeah, and so like when Google like deletes somebody's account, or like Facebook deletes somebody's account, or Twitter deletes somebody's account, the only appeal is like Congress like calling Jack Dorsey. He's not president obviously anymore, Elon Musk is, but like they would call Jack Dorsey to like Capitol Hill and be like, yo, explain to me why this Twitter account was deleted. That's our appeal process. The appeal process goes like, click on tech support for Twitter. And if that doesn't work, get your congressman to call the head of the company to Capitol Hill to protest your account suspension. And hopefully you have enough political pull that it makes them look bad and then they reinstate your account, which is a bizarre system. Like it's a honestly strange system out there. So, one of the things that just came out this week, the lab leak theory. So, well, I mean, the lab leak theory has been around for a long time. You can actually see this timeline here of like when stories on the matter came out. These are right-wing stories. These are left-wing stories. But in recent days, the Department of Energy, which has an intelligence service, which makes more sense if you know what the Department of Energy, nuclear weapons, works on. It makes sense that they have an intelligence service. But America's got like 25 intelligence services, things like that. And so like the Department of Energy said, we believe that a lab leak was the origin of the pandemic with low confidence. So they're not really standing by it, but they say that's our probable, belief. And then the FBI said we have moderate confidence that it was a lab leak. And the right-wing press was like, aha, see, we were right all along. I was watching Tucker Carlson the other day when I was running on the treadmill at the gym, and they're like, see, vindication, right? Like it's a complete vindication for us. And the thing is like, well, no, because like it, when you state something is low confidence, right? That's not that's not vindication. That's just saying, we think it is. We could be wrong. We think it is. And then the FBI though said it has moderate confidence, which is better. But there's still like 3 national intelligence agencies that say the opposite, right? And so like, is it complete vindication when like, it's mixed? Probably not. But in fact, the White House is correct here, but there is no government consensus on it. That's, as things are right now, you got like 2 for, 3 against, 1 neutral, something like that. But that's actually not what's interesting to me. And it's also not interesting to me, which will sound really weird. It's actually not interesting to me if it was a lab leak. Like, sort of like from an academic perspective, like I'd just be kind of curious to know. I've been following this theory since, the pandemic began, right? And there's never been anything like definitive, right? Like there's never been like a smoking gun, like this was, a lab leak or not, or something like that. What if they know it is and say it's low confidence? Do we really know the truth? I don't know. Like that's, like people have been wrong before, like who knows? But I'm actually not interested in if it was a lab leak or not. I'm really not. Like, I mean, I am a little bit just because I'm a curious person. But for me, as a computer science professor, what interests me about this story is the tech company's reaction to the lab leak theory, right? and they called it a conspiracy theory. Like Facebook would delete your account if you posted it. Twitter deleted the account of a Chinese scientist from Hong Kong who fled to America to escape persecution, who said, I talked to friends at Wuhan, and they said it was a lab leak. And Twitter deleted her account. To me, that's actually, as a computer science professor, like that's actually an interesting story. Like, if we scroll down to the very beginning of the thing here, mystery illness hits Cotton. Yeah. Fox calls it a startling theory. Experts, though, call it misinformation, right? How do you know it's misinformation, right? That's what's interesting to me. It's like it could have been, it could have not been, right? So how do you get across saying that it's misinformation? Like that means you know that it's false, and you don't, right? Here's CNN's fact checking the claims about the coronavirus, and experts have dismissed, but noted it's possible, and so going back to this, strongly condemn conspiracy theories. Like, how do you know it's like, it's an interesting question. Like, okay, like there's a lot of conspiracy theories that are complete nonsense, right? Like the adrenochrome or whatever it's called, where people are like sucking the blood of like children, and the lizard theory, like the David Icke lizard people run America. Like there's some just completely wild, baseless conspiracy theories. The QAnon stuff, where there was like a ping pong pizza supposedly had, like at this restaurant in DC supposedly had an underground basement where kids were being like like there's literally no evidence for it at all, and a person with a gun walked in and demanded to see where the kids are being held, and they're like, we don't have a basement. Like, I don't know what you want from us. There's literally no basement here. So there are definitely conspiracy theories that are just like just wild and wacky and no basis in reality. But calling the lab leak hypothesis a conspiracy theory, it's kind of like, well, okay, like we don't know what the answer is, so how do you know that it's misinformation, right? Because it's a possibility, right? Like even CNN said it's a possibility, but they still called it, misinformation, things like that. So, so what happened is that right. So the doctor that fled Hong Kong, they suspended her account. Right. She published a paper, basically claiming, she talked to people from the, and I checked this account. It's still suspended today, which is interesting. She talked to people who said that it was a lab leak. That's pretty low quality evidence. You know what I mean? Like, it's not great. Like, I heard it from a friend of mine, that it's not great, evidence, but, it's at the same time, should you delete somebody's account for saying that? Right? This is to me actually what the story is about as a computer science professor. It's like, what justification does Twitter have for deleting somebody who fled her own country, for fear of persecution, who said, I have this anecdotal evidence that it's a lab. Like, how does Twitter know what the truth is? Because I know I've been following this for a long time. I still don't know what the truth is. I don't know if it's a lab leak even now. I don't. I've never seen any definitive information on it either way. But it's interesting to me that Twitter thinks that they know the truth, right? They know the truth enough that somebody who says anything different from them is engaged in misinformation and should be deleted, right? That to me is like the interesting story, right? Dr. Fauci throws cold water on conspiracy theory, right? The lab in Wuhan says it didn't come from us. WHO says it's likely of animal origin. Trump says he's seen evidence that it is from the lab. Mike Pompeo says he's seen evidence. Coronavirus not man-made, says U.S. intelligence agencies, but still studying the lab. Yeah. And so there's been like this like kind of back and forth. They finally allow the people in a year after the pandemic started. PolitiFact called it "pants on fire." Like "pants on fire" is their lowest level of like lying, right? So like Tucker Carlson had that scientist on his show, and they gave it a "pants on fire" rating. That is the worst lying thing possible, and then they, deleted it afterwards. Facebook would delete your account or delete your posts if you posted anything about it. Like to me, that's an interesting question because and let me flip it around because like clearly I'm being like rather negative on Twitter and Facebook now uh because they don't know, because I know, because I've been researching it. They don't know either. Like they don't know absolutely whether or not it was a lab leak or not. They don't know, but they were still deleting accounts that disagreed with the theory, which is very interesting to me. And so to flip it around and argue for their position, the reason why they did this was because hate crimes against Asians went up after the coronavirus started. So it went from like 50 to 150, which in terms of percentages is, quite a large percentage increase. In terms of absolute numbers, it's not. It's 100. It really depends again on how you frame these questions. So what they would argue, and I was actually arguing with a person yesterday about this. They were saying, look, if you don't know the answer to something, you should pick the answer that'll cause the least harm. And so if you can censor the lab leak theory and that reduces the amount of hate crimes against Asians, then it's justified. That's sort of the Facebook, Twitter defense for the accusations against suppressing free speech. And so to me, the question is, okay, well, why shouldn't you even suppress true things then, right? Like if our main goal is minimizing harm, then like let's say it did come out that it was a lab leak. I'm not saying it is, by the way. I'm just saying like suppose we get definitive evidence it's a lab leak, then shouldn't we keep suppressing it because it'll cause hate crimes to rise? Like if that's our only concern, then the truth actually doesn't matter. We're not caring about truth. We care about preventing harm to people. So we should suppress the truth regardless. And so it's a dicey question. All right. So so the ground news has this whole timeline of like where you can see the different news stories coming out at different times, and it gives you the right wing, left wing bias on things. For example, PolitiFact retracting its pants on fire rating was only covered by the right wing media. The left wing media was dead silent on that, oddly enough. And then the coronavirus not being man made was covered more by the left than by the right. And if you're wondering why people in America seem to have different sets of facts under their belts, that's why. There's a difference in reporting coverage depending on if they're left wing or right wing. They cover different topics. And so if you only get your source of information from one political viewpoint, then you're going to be missing things from the other viewpoint. Okay. So it's important to have a wide media intake for that reason. Sounds like a mix of utilitarianism and Marxist, their justification for it. Yeah. Like minimizing harm is a very common, thing you'll see when talking about like hate speech. Why do they minimize hate speech? Like, why do they restrict hate speech on the platforms? It's because they're worried about harm caused by the hate groups, right? Or by the people. That's their justification. Whereas other people believe in like natural rights, and they say our freedom of speech is more important than the utilitarian view, And so that's one of the reasons why I start this semester with the ethical theories and the theories of truth, because that like once you understand those different viewpoints on like morality and truth, then all of a sudden you understand how people can have different viewpoints on this topic. If you're a utilitarian, if you're a utilitarian trying to minimize harm, that's a very different way of approaching this issue than if you are a natural rights person who's an absolutist in freedom of speech or whatever, right? It's a very different viewpoint on the same topic. And that's why I start with it. Okay, so let's get your thoughts now on the I'm not actually asking you, is the lab leak theory true or false? Because I know you don't know. I don't know either. We've got, some intelligence agencies saying it is, some saying it's not. What I'm curious about is what you think of the tech companies' reaction to the lab leak theory. Were they justified in deleting accounts that promoted it, or was it justified by, say, the reduction of harm to Asian Americans? Please say so on chat now. I've been talking long enough. So we got some good responses from you guys. Some people think that it is the censorship was justified by the Asian hate crimes that were going on. A lot of you said that by deleting the accounts that were promoting the theory, it looks suspicious, right? Like, why are you deleting these stories? If the guidelines are broken, yeah. But what's interesting is the guidelines are like on misinformation, right? So they rule like you can't share misinformation. But the question I have is like, how do you know it's misinformation? Like who fact checks the fact checkers? Like, clearly PolitiFact, made a mistake, right? And they changed it later, but by that point they deleted a bunch of accounts based on the fact checkers incorrect take on a situation. Like some of you said they should bring in people from different viewpoints, and that's actually what Facebook did after a lot of these corporate censorship issues got Zuckerberg hauled up in front of Congress a few times. So he actually started working with like right-wing groups to do fact checking as well as left-wing groups. And maybe you could say, well, if people from different viewpoints all agree that something should be censored, then it's okay to censor it. I don't know. There's some things that most people, not all. There are free speech absolutists, but there's some things that most people would agree should be deleted. Like if somebody says, "I'm going to come over to your house tomorrow and kill you," like not in a joking way, but like like you live at 1234 Main Street. I'm going there tomorrow and I'm going to kill you. Like I think most people wouldn't have any issues with that being deleted, right? But like once you start getting into like jokes and things like that, like they've been deleting jokes, all right? And Zuby had his account suspended for saying "okay, dude" to a trans person, right? And they said, well, you're using "dude" as a gendered term, and whether or not "dude" is gendered really is heavily dependent on context. There is no context for it, so they might have been right. I don't know, but they start getting into like comedians and censorship, and it gets really sticky like really fast, So, yeah, you're right. It's not unconstitutional. It's not illegal. But yeah, okay. So the lab leak theory is harmful either way. So censor it. If the goal is to stop hate against Asian countries, I agree with the method because a lot of racist people use the theory to attack Asian people. It's like they want people to forget about it happening, yet deleting it can cause misinformation. Yeah. And also, like, deleting things also turns into the news, right? Like, if they're trying to avoid controversy, like some of you said, like, we should delete things to avoid controversy. Deleting people's accounts for having a viewpoint causes controversy because people get really upset when tech companies start deleting a viewpoint they don't like, not because it's false, but because of the outcomes of it. And so that in and of itself caused a lot of controversy, right? So a lot of people being the post of Trump being beheaded on Twitter. Yeah, that was Kathy Griffin, right? It's like Kathy Griffin, Trump head. So is that a call for violence, right? Like, she's a comedian, not a very good comedian, but she's a comedian, and so like, you're going to suspend her account for making a joke, or is that an actual threat? I don't think it was. Like, I don't think she was actually planning on like going to the White House with a machete. She's just a semi-funny comedian, and um, and she got in trouble for it, right? So, um, some people take jokes too far. Yeah, I mean, maybe somebody else would see that as a call to violence, and so there's policies against inspiring violence, and maybe somebody would see that and be like, I'm now inspired by you, Kathy Griffin. No, nobody's ever said that, but nobody. Let's be honest. Let's be perfectly honest. Nobody's ever been inspired by Kathy Griffin. So it's like it gets really sticky. You start regulating humor. Like there's something inherently like suspicious about like trying to judge like jokes and be like, oh, I don't know if I like that joke. Like I don't know if I like where that joke's going. Or that joke's a little too provocative for me. Like it gets really like is it a call to violence? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't see that. I mean, it's like to me the biggest issue is it's just not a very realistic looking head. Like whoever did the art for it, I hope they got an A for their paper mache project in elementary school. But so another big issue. We only got 3 minutes left, so I want to hit this before we finish. Once Elon took over Twitter, he turned over a lot of his emails to a journalist named Matt Taibbi, and Taibbi went through them and published the Twitter files. And I didn't like the joke. You're banned. Yeah, exactly. It's like I feel like that's a pretty dark road to go down. When like stand-up comedians are your enemy, because stand-up comedians are kind of like the people that say the uncomfortable truth that we don't want to hear as a society. The one thing that tyrants hate is laughter, right? The uncomfortable, like, kind of reaction you get when these provocative stand-up people say something that's true that you don't really like. Once tech gets into like regulating stand-up, like, that's I don't know if that's a road that I'm comfortable with. So the Twitter files, what's interesting about them, and so to be clear, the right has been like running with these things, I think, in a completely wrong direction. Like I don't see it as this giant conspiracy thing between Twitter and the FBI. What was actually interesting to me about this is that there was like 70 or 80 FBI agents that were working as effectively unpaid Twitter moderators. And so they would go through Twitter and find tweets that they thought violated the Twitter terms of service, and then they would put them into an email and send it to Twitter, say like, hey, could you take a look at these tweets? Essentially, the FBI had their own sort of like report tweet backdoor to Twitter, right? So rather than clicking on the report button like everyone else, they would email them to Twitter and be like, hey, could you guys look at these things? We think we found some terms of service violations for you, which is a really weird thing for the FBI to be doing if you think about it, right? You've got 80 FBI agents that could be out there like hunting down, murderers and stuff like that, or kidnappers that cross state lines. And they're like combing through Twitter looking for terms of service violations. It's a strange thing. And it's not like Twitter deleted all of them either. They would delete some of them, but they wouldn't delete all of them. And so remember, censorship is only when the government deletes things. And so there's a really interesting question here, which is like, if they tell Twitter like, hey, could you guys delete these things? And then Twitter deletes it, is that censorship? Like, does that give you clean hands because Twitter is the one who's ultimately making the decision whether or not to delete something? You could argue that you do, because like Twitter would say no a fair bit of the time. Like, to Twitter's credit, like they actually came off looking pretty good actually in the Twitter files, which is again completely contrary to the narrative the right-wing media is trying to sell, where it's like this conspiracy where the FBI and Twitter conspired together to censor the stories for America. It's actually not actually what you see in the Twitter files. What you actually see is Twitter pushing back against the FBI a lot, being like, yeah, we're not really seeing a lot of Russian bots on our platform. And they're like, what? Facebook says they've been seeing a lot of it. We don't believe you. And Twitter's like, no, we really don't see anything. And Twitter like saying no a lot to the government. And so to their credit, like the Twitter people came off a lot better than you would think if you'd only heard about the Twitter files and not actually read it yourself. And that's why it's important whenever you want to be a critical thinker to actually look at the primary source material and go through it and actually see what was actually said and not rely upon other people telling you what was said because they'll lie to you. And CNN, for its part, has been like very dismissive. Oh, there's nothing here. There's no there, that kind of stuff. And it's like, no, there's something interesting there. And the something interesting there is the fact that the FBI is essentially working as moderators for Twitter. And Twitter has these transparency reports that are supposed to disclose any government involvement in content moderation, and it did not disclose any of that. And so they had monthly meetings with like the CIA and the FBI and the NSA and things like that. They had monthly meetings with these people, and none of that was disclosed in these transparency reports. And so it's like, what's the point of a transparency report if you're not actually disclosing the things that you promised that you said that you would disclose? Very interesting stuff. And so that's why I think the Twitter files are actually quite interesting, because it's revealing all of this information about how corporate censorship works that just wasn't publicly available before. For example, Twitter had these dials they could turn. Like if they had somebody they didn't like, they could reduce their reach so that their tweets would not get distributed as widely. And there's screenshots in there of like, oh, this person, we're gonna dial them down because we don't like the political message they're saying. And so they would limit people's visibility on Twitter based on their political beliefs, which is kind of scary, if you think about it, because Facebook and Twitter and Reddit are the way that we have conversations during a pandemic, right? And during the election year, they were adjusting the dials on who got to talk on their platform. And that's something that like just has not even been discussed as far as I can see in the media coverage of the Twitter files. Like, really? That's a cool thing. So, yeah. And so you could, the big story, of course, was the Hunter Biden laptop. But again, Twitter came off actually okay in the story because they're like, I don't know if this is true or not. And they're like, well, the government's saying it's true. I'm like, I don't know, but like, is it like, and you can see the people talking amongst themselves, like, I don't see this as a terms of service violation. And then like one of the executives was like, no, we want you to find a terms of service violation here. And then they did. And so Twitter did not come off ultimately very good because they deleted, the New York Post, a newspaper, over a completely true story. But they did, and when you see the internal discussions on it, you don't see any conspiracy theory, like the FBI is telling us to do this. Instead, they're just like, I don't know, like the intelligence agencies say it is, they're arguing over it and stuff like that. And eventually they made a decision. And this, ties back into like the fog of war that we talked about earlier. Like when you're in the moment, you don't know what's ultimately going to be true. Like hydroxychloroquine turned out to have no effect on COVID at all. But at the time, people were like, I don't know, there's a preliminary study that maybe says it is. And maybe vitamin D works. And it turns out vitamin D, I think, does work. I don't know. Maybe, but like when you're in the pandemic, like you just have to make decisions. And I think there's no question that they handled the Hunter Biden laptop story wrong on it because it was true. But like at the time, like you can see them, they're actually like chewing their fingernails, like, I don't know, and eventually they made a call because they trusted the government's assessment that it was Russian disinformation, which was wrong, as it turns out. So that is what the next discussion is going to be about. So you're going to be looking over the Twitter files in the lab leak case, and we're going to be talking about, when and how and what rules that social media should follow for censoring people, if at all. Okay. So Elon Musk regulated parody on Twitter. Yeah, he said, I'm a free speech absolutist, and then people made fun of him, and then he banned and everyone got their own blue check marks, and then, they changed that. It's been a very chaotic experience. So it's interesting and it's relevant, and that's why we're talking about it today, because this is like front page news right now. Twitter files and the lab leak theory and Elon and all that kind of stuff. And the CSI 1 class is different every semester. So be on the lookout for that. The assignment will be coming out like at 11-ish today. And I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say on the matter. It's a very hot, very important topic right now. It's a hot topic. So I will see you guys on Monday. Have a great weekend. Hope it warms up a little bit. Happy Thanksgiving. That's disinformation right there. I'll see you guys then. Peace.